Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another rate it or hate it video for you today from units from the Necrons Codex. We are going to be going through the data card, going through the way I play the unit, and then I'm going to rate it or hate it at the end of the video. I've either got to choose one or the other, there's nothing in between, rate or hate. Now today we're going to be looking at the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, both variants of the profiles. I think on the thumb I've got the Exterminators, who are just an easier pick to find. But we are going to be doing both of them. So, Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. Data card wise, we've got a 60mm base. They're quite big on these bases. They're 50 points a model. You can take 1, 2 or 3. Quite rare that we can divide the unit into kind of whatever we want at this stage, because with this new addition, like with Warriors for example, you can only take 10 or 20, Lich Guard 5 or 10 and so on. This unit is 1, 2 or 3. So we're going to be talking about what I like to do as well. So 50 points a man, unit of 3, maximum unit of 3. They have got the mounted keyword. They've also got fly, destroyer cult and Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. So mounted of course isn't as useful as infantry for example, with the way it interacts with terrain and so on. But yeah, mounted is mounted. Right, let's get into these statistics then. We've got a movement of 8 inches, so they are destroyer level of fast. That's quite fast to be honest, especially with fly. I know fly isn't as good as it used to be in the old editions, because first of all you've got to get your entire base up on top of a terrain feature. You can't have any overhanging bases now, and also you've got to measure it the whole way. There's no sort of unlimited vertical distance like there used to be, but it's still something. We've still got fly. Toughness 6, which is very nice. Toughness 6 is pretty tough actually. I mean, even like heavy bolter level kind of weapons still wound on 5s. So having toughness 6 means your opponent's going to need to put the big weapons into them. Strength 6 onwards, which you know, it doesn't come that commonly in a list. A 3+ armor save, there's no invulnerable save here. 4 wounds apiece, leadership 7+, and OC is 2, which is, you'd expect those kind of statistics for a Lokhust Heavy Destroyer, but the toughness 6 stands out to me. Pretty tough, 50 point model. So let's move into these range weapons as well as the melee attacks, which are not really worth much. We'll start with the Mythic Exterminator weapon to begin. So this is the one that you saw in the thumb. It's got the sort of the 3 sticks. Is that what you call them? Sticks? That's not the right word at all, but you've got the 3, it's the larger looking of the weapons. It's got the heavy keyword, so if it stays stationary, you get a +1 to hit roll, so you'll be hitting on 2s, which is beautiful. Rapid fire 6, so if you're within half range, you're going to get 6 extra shots a man, and sustain hits 1 for any critical hit rolls, normally over 6, unless there's a way of getting it to something else, but critical hit rolls are an additional hit on top of your hit. So let's go through this and then come back to those keywords. You've got a 36-inch range. So if you are using the rapid fire rule, that's an 18-inch range at rapid fire. So if you are firing at 18-inch range, you'll have 12 shots and not 6, which is quite a lot. That's a large volume for just one man. 6 attacks, as we've just kind of said. You're hitting on 3s, potentially 2s with heavy. And strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage. Now, strength 6 is in a nice place, I believe, because it not only hurts your standard infantry, it could be toughness 4, it could be toughness 5 even, because you're wounding them on 3s. But also you're wounding the really small stuff, the Gaunts and Guardians and that sort of stuff. You're wounding them on 2s, which I think is good. So it's not like overkill, it's not overpowered for the things that you want to fire it at. Whereas in some situations in the game you've got like a strength 12 weapon going up against something that's, you know, toughness 8, but you're still wounding on 3s. Whereas in this case, it kind of, even though it's only one more, like it's only strength 6, but it still does work against 2 different types of infantry, which is why I quite like the weapon. -1 AP is okay. You don't necessarily need much more than that really, and 1 damage is okay too. But why I mentioned like other types of infantry, again, Space Marines, easy example. Toughness 4, so you're wounding them on 3s. -1 AP, yes, it only puts them to a 4+ armor save, but the volume of shots here is what you need to remember. You could have 12 shots a man. If you've got a 3-man unit, that's 36 shots. And we've not even spoke about sustain hits 1. If you've got 36 shots, and 1/6 of those on average are going to be 6s, and let's say you've also not moved, so you're hitting on 2s, you virtually will be getting your 36 hits from that. And if you're firing that at something that you're wounding on 3s, you're doing a lot of work. So it's a really good weapon, and I like using those when I take these guys out. Now that is the Exterminators. As for the Ghost Destructor, this is the big boy weapon. It's got heavy again, so he can hit on 2s if you stay still. Lethal hits, so any 6s to hit will go through the wound roll, so you don't need to look at what their toughness is, although this is strength 14. It's got a 48-inch range, so it's got a better range, which means you're more likely to use the heavy profile because you're staying still, whereas the other one you've got to maybe get into rapid fire. You've got to make a decision sometimes. Do I want to move to get into rapid fire range, but I've lost heavy? I'm now hitting on 3s, but I've got 6 shots per man extra. Or do I want to stay still, hit on 2s, but not gain the rapid fire? So sometimes there's a little bit of a question there. Normally when you've got a 3 in a unit, you do make the movement and you do just get the rapid fire in. But going back to the Ghost Destructor, gone a little bit off topic there. 1 shot per man. That's a slight issue, but it is and it isn't. We'll get into it. Hitting on 3s, maybe 2s, strength 14, minus 4 AP, damage is just 6, right? That's massive. Strength 14, you're wounding virtually the entire game on 3s, if not 2s. Mostly 2s really, unless it's the really big stuff. If it's toughness 7 or less, it's 2s. Toughness 8 or more, it's 3s. Minus 4 AP goes through armor save. Things that have got a 2+ armor save usually have an invulnerable save anyway, and if it's got an invulnerable save, they're going to use that anyway. And damage 6, so if it does go through, that's hurting virtually anything in the game. Damage 6 is beautiful. So this is more of your, your monster and your vehicle kind of weapon, your anti-monster, anti-vehicle, not necessarily. Well, it can be used on infantry, but it needs to be used on high wound model count, like Terminators with the storm shields, maybe, but they've got an invulnerable save, so if it does go through, it goes through, I suppose. But really, you want to be looking at the big stuff, the big stuff. The problem with it though is 3 shots. So it is slightly hit and miss. You've got your 3 shots, you probably will get all 3 hits, especially if you've got the heavy keyword in there. You're going to get the majority of the wounds. Lethal hits will sometimes help, but what I like to do is go up against those vehicles and monsters that don't have an in-one save. Because once you know you've hit and you wound, you know you're pretty much doing the damage now because they've not got a save at all. So yeah, very strong weapon for so cheap as well, 50 points a man. They do have close combat attacks. It's 2 attacks hitting on 3s, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. It's not worth even talking about it. If they're within engagement range, they've already failed, in my opinion. They've wasted a turn because they've got to fall back. They can't then shoot if they fall back, and that's if they even survive being charged and fought. By the time it gets to your next turn, maybe they've been charged again because your fallback move is only going to be 8 inches, and your opponent can move and then charge if you've not deleted that unit. So if they get caught, I think you need to literally look at the unit that's targeted them and make sure they are deleted before moving on. So that is the ranged weapons. Let's move over to the right hand side of the deck card. The abilities, reanimation protocols, which is beautiful for this kind of unit in particular, because they're 4 wound models and you can be bringing them back because there's a unit of 3 of them. There's nothing better than, when you see one of your Locust Destroyers go down, but then in your command phase you just bring one straight back up again and your opponent thinks, damn, that's another 6 damage weapon just popped out of nowhere. Really good. But their ability optimized for slaughter I think is beautiful. So each other model in this unit makes an attack. With the Exterminator, when you target in your units anything that's not a monster or not a vehicle, you get to reroll wound rolls of a 1. So that's everything except for monsters and except for vehicles, which isn't their target anyway. Exterminators are anti-infantry, you can call them anti-mounted, what else have we got? Beasts, not cavalry, swarms, all that kind of stuff. They're anti that. So they're going to virtually be rerolling wound rolls of a 1 anyway, which is great, especially against toughness 3. You're wounded on 2s, rerolling 1s. Beautiful. And the second part of this ability is just as good. So if you're using the Ghost Destructor, which is the opposite kind of weapon, you reroll 1s against monsters and vehicles. Again, that is their target. They should be firing at monsters, they should be firing at vehicles. Sometimes they fire at Terminators, sometimes they fire at... I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head now. Beast swarms, those kind of things. Yes, they do. They will lose out on the rerolls, but the majority of the time, you're firing at tanks, you're firing at, Be'lakor, if you're within range. or you're firing at a Hive Tyrant, or the big stuff. Nice. So you're going to be re-rolling 1s anyway. That's going to be helpful because if you are strength 14 and you're going up against the big stuff, you're likely going to be wounded on 3s. Unless you've scored some lethal hits in there. Wounded on 3s, re-rolling 1s is good. It's very good. So that's the data card. Let's talk about my tactics. So first we need to talk about weapons. What weapon do I take with my heavy destroyers? It all depends on what other anti-tank I've got and what other anti-infantry I've got, because both of the weapons in my opinion are very good. Now if I've got loads of Doomsday Arcs and Canoptic Doomstalkers in my list, then I would prefer to go with the Exterminators. And if I've got loads of anti-infantry weapons, maybe I've got the Particle Beamers on the Canoptic Spiders, maybe I've got a load of Immortals with the Tesla Carbines and so on. I don't necessarily need that, so I will go towards the Gauss Destructors. If I've got loads of both and it's a larger game, a 2k game, maybe even a 3k game, which I very rarely play. But if it's that kind of game, I just kind of go with what I feel. If it's... yeah, we'll go over why now. We'll go over why now. It makes more sense if I explain why, because both are just powerful and they're both just cheap to run. Now the Exterminators, the way I run them in a 3-man unit with the Locust Lord. Now, admittedly, I don't actually own a Locust Lord, which is why he wasn't in my Hypercrypt Legion list. A lot of the comments were suggesting to put the Locust Lord in the list with some Locust Destroyers. But when I've been playing, obviously most of my games are off camera. I've only had a couple of games on camera with battle reports now, so I tend to just proxy something. It's a friendly in-house game. I do need to get... I think they're actually releasing a kit this month, aren't they? Let me know in the comments down below if they're doing that. Did I just see that or did I just dream that? God knows. But yeah, I run a 3-man Locust Heavy Destroyer unit with a Locust Lord for the 5+ critical hit rolls. So what this means is you've got 6 or 12 shots. You're trying to go for 12 shots a man with rapid fire with the sustain hits 1 on top. Sustain hits 1 is going to get triggered on a 5+, not a 6+. So that means a third of them are going to give you extra hits. So a third of 36 is 12. You're going to get 12 additional hits if you like. But then you are going to drop 6 of them because of course you're going to roll 1s when you're rolling to hit. So on average, you're looking at 42 hits from 36 shots when you're doing that play. And that's where the volume of shots comes in. No matter what you're firing at, if you've got 42 hits, even if you're winning on 5s, that's going to do work. So that's why I really like these guys. And yeah, the -1 AP also does provide some assistance. Now, if I'm taking the Destructors, I tend to do these differently. I tend to take them in individual units, unless I can ram more in and put them in pairs or even 3s. Depends on what other things I've got. Again, Doomsday Arc, Canoptic Doomstalker and so on. But if I've got those kind of units already in, I just put them in individually. 1 Locust Heavy Destroyer here, 1 Locust Heavy Destroyer there, 1 Locust Heavy Destroyer there. So a total of 3 individual models. And the reason I do that is, I've said this in a previous video, but I find that if I've got a unit of 3 of them and I'm tucking them into terrain features, there's always 1 or maybe even 2 sometimes that doesn't quite have line of sight of the model that I want to target, and I don't want to move them. I don't want to lose the heavy keyword. So what I do is if I have 3 separate models, it gives me 3 additional drops in the deployment. Instead of my opponent seeing where they are and then dropping their big stuff completely out of sight, I wait till the very end. I've got my 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers. Your opponent has to drop something big. Now you can kind of triangulate from 3 different points so that they can't hide. And even if you have to move 1, yeah, sometimes you do still have to move 1 and lose the heavy keyword, but 2 will maybe still have line of sight. But you've gained those additional drops which will help you in the deployment. But not only that, your opponent can't go from the one side of the map to the other. They can't go, right, your Locust Heavy Destroyers are planted there, I'm going to put them all the way on the other side, so they need to move just to get into range. I kind of eliminate that by having 3. Now in terms of my key detachment, they kind of work in all detachments, if I'm honest with you. They kind of work in all the detachments, whether it's your anti-tank or anti-infantry. They can sometimes just completely ignore the detachment role, just do their own thing because they're that good. If I'm using the Exterminators, I'm going to try and break this down into 2 again here. If I'm using the Exterminators, I prefer the Hypercrypt Legion. Now the Hypercrypt Legion is the hyper-phasing in detachment where you can bring them from strategic reserves. So if I'm using the Exterminators, I'm using the Locust Lord. Then you can either use the Austrioclave Fulcrum for the deep strike ability, Or you can use the Horizon Tyrant enhancement, which basically gives them rerolls of 1s or full rerolls if they've actually entered the battlefield that turn, which you make sure they would have. So they're coming in from strategic reserves off the side of the board, get them within rapid fire range, and they've got full rerolls and critical hits of a 5+. That's crazy. That's crazy good. That's crazy good. What you do at that point, if you get like a 3 or a 4, because now you are hitting on 3s, you're not hitting on 2s because you've lost heavy because you've moved. But if you get a 3 or a 4, even though that is a hit, I will choose to reroll it. You've got full rerolls if you want to reroll them. Fish for the 5s and 6s. You may as well. You've got just as much of a chance of getting a 3, 4, 5 or 6 anyway. You're more likely to still get the hit, but you've actually got a third of a chance now of adding it to the sustain hits 1. So that's what I like to do with the Hypercrit Legion. You're going to be rerolling 1s to wound naturally with their ability. So there's a lot of rerolls there. Now if I'm using the Ghost Destructors, the detachment is less important because they don't really interact much with the Hypercrit Legion. They don't need to hyperphase really. The Annihilation Legion, I mean, you've got the -1 to hit with the Masks of Death Stratagem. That's sort of so-so. The Murderous Reanimation to do reanimation protocols if you destroy a unit or get them below half strength. It's so-so. Situational, but realistically we aren't playing that detachment anyway, are we? If Games Workshop are going to show no love to that detachment, then why should we? In fact, I'd probably just use the Index detachment for this one with the Awakened Dynasty if you're playing the Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Ghost Destructors. If you do have a Locust Lord in there, you get a +1 to the hit roll, and that means you can move them, because the heavy keyword becomes redundant because you've got a +1 anyway. And then there's stratagems within that detachment that you could use, like the Vengeful Stars, for example, or you keep the Locust Lord up and running with the Eternal Guardian stratagem, and so on. So yeah, I think the Hypercrit Legion for the Exterminators, the Awakened Dynasty for the Ghost Destructors, although then you can't really individualise them because you need the Locust Lord in there. So that's kind of what I was saying, it doesn't really matter too much for the Destructors, kind of irrelevant, they're just good no matter what, they're good no matter what. So as for comparisons, well, we can start with the Doomsday Arc. It's 200 points, so that's 50 points more than a full 3-man unit, but it's much tougher with toughness 9 and 14 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save. It's got the strength 18 weapon with devastating wounds if it stays stationary. It's also got all the small arms fire with the Ghost Flare arrays on top of that, and the big cannon is 4 damage, not 6, so it's a comparison. I think a lot of people do prefer the Doomsday Arc, but if you've got 50 points, 100 points, 150 points even spare, it's easier to take the Locust Heavy Destroyers. The Doomstalker is another one, the Canoptic Doomstalker. Obviously you would be using the Canoptic Court if you use the Doomstalker, but without the Canoptic Court it's not as good. It is cheaper than 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers though. It's got 12 wounds, which is the same amount of wounds. But the advantage that the Locust Heavy Destroyers have over the Doomstalker, and very similar to the Doomsday Arc in fact, is there's no spillover. If you lose a model that, let's say you're taking damage from a damage 6 weapon and it goes onto our Locust Heavy Destroyers, you just kill a model. Even though they're only 4 wound models and the damage was 6, there's no spillover of the extra 2. Whereas if they're firing at a Doomsday Arc or a Doomstalker, they're going to do a flat 6. So they do have that advantage over the 2 vehicles. Of course, those 2 vehicles lack any characters that can interact with them, apart from the Awakened Dynasty, of course. You can also make comparisons to the larger options, such as the Silent King. The Silent King carries his 2 Minis, which have got the Annihilation Beams, which are, I think they're identical in terms of stats. They've got the damage 6, their strength 14, I believe they are, minus 4 AP. But then you could ask yourself, would I rather have the Silent King in the list? Or would I rather take, say, I don't know, 9 Locust Heavy Destroyers all with Destructors? Or you can even have a mixed bag if you like, Destructors and Exterminators. What would you prefer? I suppose it depends on what the Silent King synergies are within the list, so it's quite difficult to kind of work that out. But a lot of people would probably just choose the Locust Heavy Destroyers in this situation. Right, so let's rate it or hate it, guys. In fact, before we get into this little section, I just want to clear something up. In the Canoptic Doomstalker video we did, which was the first one of this series, I was getting a little bit of hate because everyone was saying, no, you're wrong. The Canoptic Doomstalkers aren't the best anti-tank. It's the Locust Heavy Destroyers. I wasn't saying they weren't the best. I wasn't saying they were the best. It's just whether I rate them or hate them. It's as simple as that. So very similar to the Canoptic Doomstalkers. Do I rate the Locust Heavy Destroyers? Yes, of course I do. If I like something, doesn't mean I hate something else. Just wanted to clear that up. But yeah, these guys are obviously getting a thumbs up from me. I have these guys in virtually every list I make. Even if I do have Doomsday Arcs and Canoptic Doomstalkers, I've still always got room for Locust Heavy Destroyers. That's why I own 9 of them. So yeah, guys, it's an easy thumbs up from me.